Hello and welcome to Part 5 of the Academy to Functions ATF-Facilitator Certification Workshop. In this part, we'll gain an understanding of the categories of dysfunction. The Academy to Function has 6 primary categories of dysfunction. The first is a lower chain dysfunction, or L1, which takes place below the knee. The lower chain dysfunction 2, which is the knee and down. Core dysfunction, which starts at the waist. Core dysfunction 2, which is an asymmetrical shift to the right. Core dysfunction 2 with the asymmetrical shift to the left. And lastly, the U1 posture, or the upper chain dysfunction. For a complete depiction of each one of these, you may also go to the website for further clarification and how to use the functional screening tool to assess these. But in the rest of this workshop, we'll go ahead and go through each category of dysfunction as well as the problematic musculature associated with each. Starting with lower chain dysfunction 1, or L1, we're going to see folks who are complaining of things like painful feet or arches, plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendonitis, or pain in the back of the heel. Oftentimes we'll have shin splints, possibly jumper's knee or runner's knee, and then complains of lateral and or medial patella pain. What we see with these folks is oftentimes their feet, whether it be in a postural screen, a stationary picture, or the overhead squat, is we're going to see the feet turn out. So the knees still track and are straight and don't move out or deviate, caving in or caving out, but we see the feet move out. This is usually due to a tight perineal complex, which is on the lateral lower leg, and a tight lateral hamstring, which we cannot see in this view, but if it were to be turned around and from the back side, it'd be again on the lateral side of the posterior thigh. The other thing we see is a weak tibialis anterior, which is a weakness of the muscle here on the front of the shin. Weak medial hamstrings, again on the back side to the medial side of each thigh, and weak glutes. Lower chain dysfunction 2, or L2, often results in conditions like the shin splints, jumper's knee, runner's knee, and patellofemoral pain. Much like L1, the primary difference being that the knees buckle or cave in, otherwise known as knock knees. And these are very common in females, and so it might be something to look out for if you're working with a female client, specifically if they complain of knee pain. Again, this is due to tight adductors or inner thigh muscles, the groin. Okay, weak TFL, tensor fasciae latae, which is again on the outer hip here on either side. Right. Tight gastrocnemius, which is a tight calf, and tight lateral quadricep, which is the front side of the thigh here again on the lateral side. What we'll see with these folks is we'll have a weak medial hamstring. So again, if this was a posterior view, I'd be looking on the inside. A weak VMO, which is a teardrop muscle right here on the inside of each thigh, and again anterior tibialis, which is that front side muscle here on the lower leg. Core dysfunction 1, or C1, these individuals will usually complain of low back pain, hamstring pain, quad pain, or groin strains. And what you can see here is in the stationary view, we're seeing this lordosis, or this rounding of the low back. Oftentimes what we'll see a rounding in the low back, a protruding belly, and a protruding buttocks. The other thing we might see in the core dysfunction is as the person goes through their overhead squat on this lateral view, we may see an arching of the back, which isn't really evident in this particular photo, but you'll see an arching in the back. Or if I were to draw a straight line through my ankle bone, through my knee and straight up, and then from my shoulder through my arms, those two lines should bisect outside the body, so I'd be looking for them to bisect or never touch upwards and outwards of the body. If the lines were to go through, as they do here, and see how they bisect or would cross into one another right in the body here, that is a forward lean, which is indicative of a core 1 dysfunction. These are usually, again, tight gastroc or soleus, which is the tight calf musculature. Okay? You have a very, very tight hip flexor complex, and specifically we're looking at the psoas major, which attaches or originates rather on the low back on the inside. It's a deep internal hip flexor, runs through the hip and inserts on the anterior femur or the front side of the femur or the thigh bone, which causes this forward tilting of the hips. The erector spinae, which is it's actually a group of long muscles that run along the back of the spine, and specifically in the lumbar region are really, really tight, again causing a bowstringing or a bowing of the back. These individuals usually have tight lats in through the side, which oftentimes leads to this arm drop and or forward lean. The tight lat, because the lat actually comes through and is originating here in the thoracolumbar fascia or the low back. And in some cases, individuals will have a tight abdominal complex, which is usually actually pretty rare. They'll also have a weak glute and weak intrinsic core stabilizers. Okay. Core dysfunction 2, or asymmetrical shift to the right. Again, we see here the client or the participant is shifting to their right, or an asymmetrical shift to the right. Well, this one is a bit exaggerated. Do watch the participant or watch the client, and it may be more subtle, or you may even find halfway through the functional squat they may deviate to the right, but then as they reach the end of their motion will deviate back to norm. That is still considered a C2R, even though they don't finish in what would appear to be a C2R or asymmetrical shift to the right, that through the motion they actually make that shift to the right. These individuals complain of low back pain, and specifically SI pain, that pain in the buttocks or low back, and again you see the hamstring, quad, and groin strains. You see that shift to the right, and that's due to a tight adductor complex and TFL on the right side. Again, this is in reference to the individual, so tight TFL and adductor complex on the right side, and a tight lateral hamstring again on the right side, while we have weak glute med, or the buttocks muscle on the side, and a weak adductor complex on the left side. Core dysfunction 2L, or asymmetrical shift to the left, is the exact opposite of the previous. You'll have the individuals who have similar chief complaints, the only difference being that we are making this shift to the left side, so it's exactly opposite. Again, I will say that you need to pay particular attention to their FFPs and make sure that you pay attention to what side they are performing each exercise on. Lastly, we have upper chain dysfunction 1, or U1. These individuals will complain of headaches, biceps tendonitis, front side shoulder pain, rotator cuff impingement, thoracic outlet, or just a lot of anterior shoulder injuries and or pain. You're going to see a forward head with them. If I bisected a line, if I ran a line right through the hip here, I'm going to see the shoulders rounded or moved forward. I'm going to see the head move forward in front of the tip of that shoulder. As I move through a overhead squat, I'm going to see my arms aren't going to stay in alignment with the body. They're actually going to fall forward like they do in this picture. And what we're seeing with that is we have a really tight upper trap, and that's why we get a lot of trigger points in our shoulders and levator scapulae, which is a shoulder blade elevator. Sternocleidomastoid is right here on the front side. This is also known as the prayer muscle. Okay. It becomes shortened and tight. The scalenes are lateral neck muscles. And then the lats. Again, the lats get tight, as well as the front side pecs. When the shoulders round, the pecs become shortened, and the back side of your back or upper back becomes weak. So your cervical flexors, your rhomboids, your middle trap all become weakened. Teres minor, which is a rotator cuff muscle, which is what externally rotates the shoulder, it becomes weak, as well as the infraspinatus. So real quick anatomy lesson here. You don't have to memorize every one of these muscles, but you do want to think about problematic musculature, especially as they are in groups. Usual or problematic areas in terms of tight musculature is usually the calf, which is the soleus and gastrocnemius. This is very, very common in females who wear heels or gentlemen who wear work boots with an elevated heel. That becomes shortened over time and really leads to a whole host of problems. The perineal complex, which is the lateral lower leg. Okay. The hip flexors and the upper anterior thigh. We're looking right here. Again, usually the upper thigh become very, very tightened. Your adductors, especially in the L2 dysfunction where the knees cave and buckle in, we're looking at my adductors or medial musculature on the anterior thigh. For those of you with lateral knee pain, you may see a lot of, and or even that L1, L2 dysfunction, you're going to see a lot of tight IT bands, which is this structure right here, this white structure on the lateral thigh. And then the biceps femoris, or the outer posterior thigh or hamstring, this muscle here. And notice again how it comes through and wraps around the knee. And this is a culprit for lateral knee pain. Continuing with problematic or tight musculature, as we move up and out of the IT band, we're looking at our TFL, our outer hip here, upper traps here, and here on the anterior view, latissimus dorsi, and here's that thoracolumbar fascia I talked about. This is where the lat tightness can transfer into low back pain. Pectoralis, as that shoulder rounds, becomes shortened here. And then the erector spinae, which are difficult to see here because we have the latissimus dorsi and the trap over top of it, but runs underneath and along the spine on either side. Weak musculature, or where we're weak, is that anterior tibialis here on the front side of the lower leg. Vastus medialis, which is the anterior thigh here on the medial side. Okay. Glute med on the lateral buttock, and glute max, the larger muscle here on the buttocks. Transverse abdominis, which is a deep ab muscle that you cannot see, but its orientation runs side to side, thus the transverse. Multifidus, also a deep muscle, which is like a braided rope up the spine. Internal obliques and external obliques, again on an oblique angle, or here on the abdomen. Rhomboids are it's underneath the trap right here and in between the two shoulder blades. Mid trap right here. Teres minor, again the back side, and infraspinatus on the posterior rotator cuff. That concludes our detailed analysis of the categories of dysfunction. Again, please review each one of these utilizing the website and or this facilitator training video or the manual. It's important to understand each one of those groups and their general areas of problematic tightness and or weakness. That concludes Part 5 of the ATF Facilitator Certification Workshop.